Hello, everyone out there in the multiverse. I'm Dan.
And I'm Drea, and we own Multiverse Comics in Culpeper, Virginia. Unfortunately, Multiverse Comics is not open right now, and that is because we have no new comics. Dan, why don't we have any new comics?
Because the distributor is not distributing.
Again, they're taking care of their employees. They consider their delivery personnel to be non-essential, so they're trying to keep them safe. Fine, that's awesome. We're okay with that, except for the fact that we have no new books. And so what's the point of having the shop open if there are no new books? However, as we've mentioned before, we're totally fine with you guys, if you're local, contacting us through Facebook and saying, hey, can you come to the shop during this time? Again, we only live a few minutes away, so it's very easy for us. In fact, somebody called us earlier today and wanted to come in and buy something. We met up with this person, so hey, something's working.
Yep.
So with that in mind, what we decided to do was to give you guys some ideas of what you might be able to access, some new things that you might want to look into at your local comic book store, or and if we're your local comic book store, come on down. But we wanted to talk about some trades that that we actually have and that your local comic book store may have. How many times can I say local comic book store in one video?
Try this.
Please don't turn me into a drinking game. Anyway, so the first one we're going to talk about is a comic that we've actually talked about before, but because the first 6 issues have come out already, it's a brand new comic. But since the first 6 issues are out, they finished an arc. They now have it in trade, and that is Once and Future. Dan has been reading this as it came out. I actually just finished, was able to catch up because of quarantine and plenty of time to read. So I was able to catch up, and I was just as happy finishing off this arc as I was starting it off. This this series is amazing. A lot of very interesting twists and turns, and it definitely delves into the legend of King Arthur, but it delves into aspects that you may not know about. It actually reminds me a lot of Fables. You know that that series. That was another series that we started reading together when we were dating, and it stays true to the source material, but also digs deeper into background information and other legend and myth that you may not know about just as a casual reader, like things that didn't end up in Grimm's fairy tales. Same with this. There are elements in here that, as far as we know, are part of the mythology, but didn't necessarily end up in, oh my gosh, what was that book? I'm blanking on the name. But, the Legends of King Arthur, all the ones that are out there, movie or book. And I know you really liked it even more than I do. So what do you want to say about Once and Future?
I mean, it's just a great read. The first issue had me hooked. I'm an avid reader of comics. I've read a lot. I know a lot about comic history. This would probably be the best series in a decade, and I'm not saying one of the best. I'm saying the best.
Yeah.
It's just wonderfully done. The characters are fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
They're all given personalities that are just nice. It's like you like these characters.
Yes.
Even some of the characters that do stuff that you don't approve of, you still like the character. Yeah. So
artwork is beautiful.
Yeah, great artwork also.
And some of the things like there's definitely that element, because you always have that expositional character, and what I mean by that is you have this character who doesn't know for what's going on for whatever reason, and so the character who is in the know is telling this character what's going on so that the reader knows what's going on. And there's always so many different ways an expositional character can be played out, and sometimes they just come off as very, very dumb because you have to give the reader the information, and some writers that don't really have a handle on that will just have this blank slate of an expositional character, and that is not the case here. In fact, there's some elements. I'm trying to figure out how to say this without giving anything away, but there's definitely some elements with your expositional character that, and more come in. So it's not just one person. So they get to kind of share the burden, which is nice. But also, like, once they kind of latch onto it, they start making decisions to move the plot forward, and you're just like, all right, they're on the train. Let's go. Mm-hmm. So that's very cool. So definitely, trade of Once and Future. Really, 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 really please just read it. It's amazing. I love it. Next.
All right. Next, we're going to go from something new to something very, very old. It's been since the 80s. So, since I was a small child, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Watchmen. It is a thing that most comic book fans have read, probably. It definitely pulls the curtain back and takes a good look at what it is meant to be a superhero.
Yeah.
It delves very deeply into um, the legends of heroes and like motivations um, and the heroes aren't always altruistic,
Yeah.
and um, I'm not going to give any of the plot away, even though it's so old. But
I've never read it.
yeah, she's never read it, but it is something worth the read. It is something that anyone who calls himself a comic book fan should read. It's one of those things. It's just because it's at the time it was very very groundbreaking.
Now, let me ask you this. Okay, so I'm looking at. I'm not going to show too much, but you have some pages with just typeset on them. Is that in the original comic, or is this something new for the trade?
I read it as a trade, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was actually in the actual comics because it was like at the end of an issue, I believe.
Okay.
So I've never read the individual issues because I got into comics a little bit later, but yeah, I'm pretty sure the text stuff was like at the very end of the issue, giving a little depth into that issue that you just read.
That's intriguing because, I mean, you will have, like, at the end of typical comic books, you're going to have letters, almost letters to the editor type of thing. Sometimes you'll have information from the writer. I remember in one of the Firefly, I think it was a Firefly comic where Adam Baldwin had actually written, about accepting the position or accepting the character Jane. He's like, yeah, I never played a woman before, so which is just funny.
I actually think that was the forward of one of the trades.
The forward, yeah.
I think that's what that was.
So that kind of thing is in there, but you're saying that this is actually more story centric.
Yes, yeah, that's more story centric stuff. Yeah.
All right, so you want to talk about this, or you want to continue with trades?
Let's continue with the trades.
Okay, we'll save the best for last. Maybe not the best. We actually started with the best. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
But this one's slightly different.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
All right, so we'll go with the Turtles IDW series that released. I'm going with this because that's something she has read. This is the first 4 issues, I believe. I believe it's only the first 4. Yeah, so she's
the arc ends. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that is the arc ended, but it could be issue 5 because that's like a standalone.
Fair enough.
But anyways, yeah, I believe it's just issue 1 through 4 in that. And I just have to say that this Turtle series is something we've talked about before, and it is awesome. It grounds the characters into believable settings. This entire series has done a lot of world building.
Yes. And there's callbacks to all the previous iterations that are just tongue-in-cheek enough to be realistic and fun.
Yeah.
Like, they're not hanging a lantern on them necessarily. They're almost throwaway lines. Like, I'm trying to find the one I just saw, but there's, a sweatshirt that says Cowabunga. Because...
Yeah.
And it's not really... it's just kind of a couple panels and move on with your life. But, yeah, so you can tell that the writers take the history of this story very, very seriously and want to honor it while still forging their own path. So it's very, very well done.
Yeah, and I just gotta say that I love what they've done with the Turtles in this.
Yeah.
Their personalities, they fleshed them out even more so than has been done in a lot of iterations, and they've given reasons. Like, for instance, one of the things I love is they've given reason for Raph to be a hot-headed loner. They've given that reason in the first arc. You know why he's that way.
Yep.
And I love it. Michelangelo is the optimistic, fun-loving guy, but he's not dumb in this.
No, he's not at all.
He is not dumb, and he's willing to stand up for what he believes in.
Yeah.
Even if that means standing against his family.
Yeah. He's the hopeful one, definitely.
Yes, and Donnie's the scientific one, of course, that has problems with their new origin.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right.
He has problems accepting it.
Yeah, he's everything he knows is being challenged, and that is a huge, huge character arc for him. So yes, turtles. Get the turtles. Get the trades. Love them. We love them.
All right. And next we will go to Marvel 1602.
Now this, I will say, because I have not read this, but I have to say that Neil Gaiman is one of my absolute favorite authors. I love him dearly. In fact, one of my favorite experiences so far with this quarantine is I was able to find an audiobook of Neil Gaiman reading Coraline. So Neil Gaiman read Coraline to me. But anyway, we're talking about comics. I just had to say how much I love Neil Gaiman. Continue.
Yes, this is basically what if the Marvel Universe started in 1602.
Because why not?
Yes. It takes, fun little twist with characters, and, like, there's Daredevil in here. He's the guy with the blindfold, obviously, right there. They take some twist on the Hulk, Fantastic Four. They're, of course, explorers, naturally.
Switch Family. Switch Family Fantastic Four? No, wait. Switch Family Reed. There we go.
Peter's like an apprentice. Peter Parker.
Yes.
Is like an apprentice, and he actually gets bitten by a spider at the very end of the story. So there's somewhat of a sequel stuff
Okay,
to
I was going to say, so there's no Spider-Man? Like,
yeah, there's somewhat sequels to this, and at that point he does have... It's been a while since I remembered, so I can't remember a lot of details, but I do remember I really enjoyed the twist of them coming about during this time period. Like, I think it was like the X-Men that they're considered witches, basically, because at this particular time, and
boy, that's a beautiful artwork.
and it's beautiful artwork in there.
Let me find that page I was just looking at. Keep talking. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
find the page.
and it was like
That artwork, man, that is beautiful. Oh, that is gorgeous.
Daredevil's like a blind swashbuckler, of course, and it was a really good take on Marvel Universe that was around the time of the New World and all that stuff. And actually, this story takes place in Europe, but at the end, it's like all the characters actually go to the New World.
That's horrifying. I won't. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I barely need to read this.
All right. Yes, you do. You should. All right. And the final thing we're going to talk about isn't actually a trade. It's a novel. It's currently a trilogy. The last book in the series has just come out this past November.
So, Renegades. I'm going to talk a little bit first about the author, because I know Marissa Meyer. She's probably most well known for the Lunar Chronicles series that she wrote a few years ago, and that is where she took fairy tale stories like Cinderella and Red Riding Hood and made them kind of cyberpunk and set them in space. It was beautiful. It was a great series. In fact, I just finished rereading it earlier this year. So, Dan told me about this book. And I actually waited to read it because I'm one of those people that if I know it's going to be a trilogy, I have to wait for the third one to come out. I don't have the patience to wait for the series to end. So when the series is finally out is when I actually read it. Anyway, he of course has the patience of a saint because he's married to me.
Yeah.
So
I just forget everything that happened.
So he was able to read
so
it.
I'm like, wait, this doesn't seem familiar when I'm reading the.
We had a lot of conversations about.
Yeah, okay.
Wait, did this actually happen there? I don't know.
So maybe you should wait till the whole thing comes out. Maybe there's credit.
Maybe I'm right.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, so a few years ago, several young adult authors, this is a young adult series, I will say that, several young adult authors created books, wrote novels that were based on famous superheroes. And so there's one about Batman, there's one about Wonder Woman, you have Warbringer. There is this one wasn't necessarily about a particular superhero, though. This is more set in the world of superheroes, where you don't really side necessarily with the heroes.
A one sentence description I would use is it's like X-Men if it's from the perspective of the Brotherhood. Basically.
Yes, although you're not limited to the X-Men, and you're not even limited to either DC or Marvel.
There are very parallels between existing characters, like Captain Chromium would be Superman.
Right, but then Ace would be Magneto.
Yeah, Ace would be more like Magneto.
And so you have. So anyway, basically you're following the story of Nova, who is an arch enemy.
Yeah. Oh, Nova is not her super.
Anarchist.
Nova is not her superhero name, by
No.
the way. That's her actual birth name.
Yeah.
So yeah. It sounds like a superhero name. It's
Fair
like
enough.
there is a character named Nova. There's several of them actually.
Yeah.
So.
So anyway, so Nova is an anarchist, and her goal is to infiltrate the Renegades, which is the superhero faction.
Yes, it's a big
It's not even
organization.
a faction; it's the organization. I mean, they're
It's kind of like if
commercialized.
Justice League ruled the world.
Yeah, or at
Yeah.
least their corner of it.
Yeah, well, no, they do because there are other factions in other cities and everything like that. They
That's
basically rule the world.
That's fair. In the book, you really don't travel to these other world or other portions
Cities.
of the world. Cities, you just kind of stay. Anyway,
It deals a little bit with it in the third book, but
that's fair.
you know,
And again, we're trying really hard not to give any
Yeah.
spoilers because we really, 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 really want you to read this. It's amazing. And we're kind of going off topic at this point because this is not something you would necessarily buy in a comic book store. But if you are comic fans at all, absolutely 100%, you need to read Renegades. I've heard other people. I watch a lot of BookTube, and you can always tell when someone reviews Renegades that isn't really a comic book fan because they just don't get it. So this is something that is definitely very, very, very specific to us. This is one of those like this was written for us.
Yes,
Comic book geeks. You know, this
even
is our
the,
book.
The ending of the trilogy is a very superhero like.
Oh gosh,
ending,
yes, it's
you know?
beautiful.
It's beautiful. It gives a lot of details, but it really has that comic book feel.
Yeah, I love dystopian trilogies,
and to talk about that for a second, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
You're fine.
But it's like a utopia and dystopia in one book.
Yes,
you
I would
know?
agree with that. And I was even say, like, I can't even label this as a dystopian world. It is, but it's not. But I love dystopian trilogies, but there are certain things about them that I absolutely hate, and one of them is. Well, actually, I'm not even going to tell you what the tropes are that I hate because, again, I'm trying very hard not to give spoilers. But there are several tropes that I see often in dystopian trilogies, and one of them is definitely that the ending just sucks for different reasons, which I will not get into right now. This one did not. I loved it from beginning to end. It was amazing. And I don't say that about a lot of trilogies. There are very few trilogies that I can say, yep, all of it was good. A lot of them are like, should have stopped at the first book. Second, third one, don't even need to be read. This one, please read it. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so find a copy of Renegades somehow, some way, and read it. And then continue with the other two because they're amazing. And then when you're finished with this, if you decide that you like Marissa Meyer's writing, continue with the Lunar Chronicles because they're good too.
Yes.
All of it's good. Well, I hope that you enjoyed our rambling and interrupting each other and basically just
Talking over each other, you know.
geeking
that's
out
what we
about the
do.
things that we love to read
Yeah.
because we are readers first and foremost, beyond anything else. Whether it's comics, dystopian, whatever, we are readers. I read Shakespeare. He reads comics. There's a Taylor Swift song in there somewhere. But anyway, with that said, we hope that you enjoy reading. Do not forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the multiverse.